Good afternoon. Just want to talk about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I believe that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil represents mixture. And because in the beginning of the creation, when God created everything, and and He says that everything was good, and also there was the tree of life. If I look forward to Revelation, I see that the tree of life is there, and it seems on the new earth, new heaven and new earth. The tree of life is there, but not the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So I believe that Satan planted the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I can't prove that. I mean, did Satan have some kind of creative power that he could do this? I find that very difficult to believe. See, even the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life, were they metaphors? Were there actual trees that they actually could eat from? Were they living metaphors? Is that something else, a living metaphor? For example, in the book of Revelation, John sees a lamb with 7 eyes. Is that what actually happened there? Was he looking at kind of a living metaphor, if that kind of makes any sense? So I believe that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil represents confusion. And as I've said in previous videos, I believe that the enemy has put mixture into the law. So in that respect, the tree of knowledge of good and evil represents the law as well as represents Christianity. For example, Paul, and in the writing in the scriptures, many times it says, the law of sin and death, the law of sin and death. Christ has redeemed us from the law of sin and death. The law brings death. Satan death is the last enemy, and Satan is death is his thing. Forget what that scripture says. But then Paul also says, but the law is good. So we have both. We have the bad stuff. You eat of it, you die. And then the law is death. And then you have Paul saying, but the law is good, and there's good stuff, it would seem, in there. So it's mixture. So I understand that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil represents mixture. But now let's just quickly look at something else here. In my understanding, wrongly or rightly, and there's so little said on the matter, the whole beginning account of the origins, it is so little from what we call the Holy Bible, the 66 books. There's so little there. Now I know there's a lot of other writings about the creation and what happened there, and all the different multiplicity of different views and different revelations. Now, to be honest, I can't go down too far down that avenue. I've got to be kept on a leash, because if I don't, I'm gonna end up with the dark fairies. So these things are interesting, but Monday morning comes and Jesus says, I've got to love my enemy. That's when the reality happens. That's when all this turn the other cheek. That's when the real things happen. So like Paul says, though I understand all mysteries and have all knowledge and have not love, it means nothing. So these things are interesting. I don't think, and it's unwise to take them too far. We know this. And again, wisdom, we've got to be careful here, because wisdom can be beguiling. And for example, Lucifer was full of wisdom, but it corrupted him. Solomon was full of wisdom, but it corrupted him. So wisdom is not safe. So when people retreat into wisdom, even though that wisdom may be correct, in itself, wisdom is not safe. That's why everything goes back to Jesus, and Christ has become to us the wisdom of God. That's a different wisdom. So going back to the Garden of Eden. And now what? This is what I understand happened. And at a different video, I might go into a little bit more detail, just for interest, nothing more than that. And like a great quote somebody once said to me, "Who knows?" I love that. Who knows about these things? Anyway, in the beginning, we had the situation where the Spirit, if you read it, is brooding in a feminine way, interestingly, brooding over the waters. And I understand that those, and I'll share in another video, that brooding, I believe, is brooding over a chaos that was from another judgment. And so I understand that the Noah's flood, for reasons that are, Noah's flood was a second flood, a second judgment flood. And so out of the chaos that God, so we've got the account of the creation where God makes mankind, and I think that mankind, I suspect that Lucifer, if Satan is Lucifer, there's questions about that. Was he just a king of Tyre or whatever it was? If they're the same person, that Lucifer had domain over the earth at that realm. Because how could Lucifer come into the Garden of Eden at will, in and out? What? You can't just walk in and out of my house. You don't have that authority to do that. How was it that Lucifer was able to do this? So I suspect that at that early stage, that Lucifer was some kind of high priest over mankind, and I think it's at that phase, that place, that he corrupted. Can't prove it, doesn't matter. But I don't believe that saying this one day when I stand before Jesus and give an account, as we all will, I don't believe that Jesus is going to say, "Oh, so you thought, well, open the books, what's written there? So you thought this, and you thought Satan didn't have it. Well, you're in trouble." No. We'll be judged by our works. I don't believe we'll be judged by doctrine. Now that's I believe in sound doctrine. Of course, it's vital, etc., and those things. Don't get me wrong on that one. But I don't believe we'll be judged by doctrine. We'll be judged. All of us will be judged by our works. So it seems then, in my understanding, that there was mankind, the first, and then in the middle of all this, it seems that it says that God planted, the true God, the Most High, planted a garden east of Eden. And in that garden is where he put his hand in and formed Adam out of the clay. And so I think that's what happened, because clearly there was something else going on. That Cain, remember when he fled from the presence of the Lord, etc., he married a woman and started a city. Well, who are these people? Who knows? So it's interesting too with the beginning account with Satan, when he said to Eve, he said, "You'll not surely die, but you become like God, knowing good and evil." How did he know this? How did he know this? I think that at some part that Satan, before his fall, may have been on the council of God, whether that's the Elohim, who knows. There's a whole other teaching about, there seems to be some kind of council in the heavenlies, and it seems that Satan was part of it, and he may, in spite of his fall, still be allowed in that council. In Revelation we see, and in Job, when the sons of God appear, Satan comes with them. He may still be allowed in for some legal reason in that realm that we know nothing of. So again now, so if Satan was the covering cherub and anointed cherub, not the anointed one, the anointed cherub, before his fall, and God's feet, the earth is the Lord's footstool, and so it's almost like kind of having been the prime minister or something over there, he may have had dominion and domain over the earth as part of his function as the covering cherub, and therefore when he fell, etc., But so now this is the question I want to put to you guys, that if as many Christian people in Christianity believe, that when Adam and Eve fell, they exchanged masters. The one that you serve, that is your master. So they obeyed Satan, and the one you obey is your master, etc. So they exchanged masters at the fall, and therefore Satan became God of the whole earth, etc. But my question to you is this: if you had a slave, and I bought that slave from you, or that slave exchanged loyalties by whatever means, obedience or whatever, whose job is it now to look after that slave? Is it your job or is it mine? It's now my slave. So when they were naked in the garden, in that whole account, who clothed them with animal skins, with animal sacrifice, blood sacrifice? Who killed the animals to clothe them? Was it the Most High? Was it Jesus that did that? Or was it the new master of the human race simply looking after those that once belonged to God but exchanged loyalties? It's just a question that I'm asking. Another thing too is in the whole account with Cain and Abel, that when it talks about Abel offering, the fat, the issue of the fat. See, that's an interesting term because it can also be used for milk and cream. So again, I don't believe, because of my understanding of animal sacrifice and what the scriptures say about animal sacrifice, I didn't desire these burnt offerings and so on. I don't believe that the good Yahweh, the Father, required all this. And we'll discuss later what I believe that actually happened in connection with that. But I think that when Abel's offering that was acceptable, I don't believe was a blood offering, as is often taught in Christianity. I believe that offering was a living sacrifice. Like Paul says, we are living sacrifices. And that fat that it talks about was to do with cream and milk of the lambs, and in some cultures today it might be, but that's goat's milk, etc. I believe I understand that that's what's going on there. And at another video, I want to begin to discuss this whole issue about Jesus being the ransom for many. And my question is this: who sets the ransom price? If I kidnapped your daughter and I've got her in captivity now, who sets the ransom price for her release? It's not you. I set that ransom price. I've got her. Because if you set the ransom price, you could say, well, I'll give you £10 for, okay, well, there you go. No, I say £25 million if you want it back. So the question is, who set the ransom that Jesus paid? Because remember, Jesus came under the law to save those under the law. Why do you save people under a law that you've written? Doesn't make sense. If the law is good, if you've got this kingdom and these are the precepts that you live this kingdom by, don't come and save me from it. It's great. This is wonderful. So, which is now asking the question: who wrote the law? Who wrote things like the soul that sinneth it shall die? Who wrote things like he cursed as he hangs on a tree? So we'll try and look at that at the next video.